on Westmoreland, and I'm really humbled and honored to be here today. Thank you for being part of my journey. So let me ask you this. Would you be willing to be landed in the mental health ward to have a big transformation in your life?
Yeah.
Sure. Really? Well, that's what it took for me. That's what it absolutely took for me to really find my soul's calling. So let me tell you about my journey. It started out being disempowered. We'll go back to childhood. As a child, I was molested by somebody I trusted. And it affected me very deeply because I became very insecure. I had self-loathing. And today's studies show that 1 out of 4 women have been molested, 1 out of 6. And I actually think it's higher. But what it did to me was it made me feel like a failure. So with the lens of, being a failure, I went out there trying to always prove myself. And maybe that's something that you all can relate to. And I'll give you an example. I have a grandmother who has a PhD. She always told me as a child with tough love, you're not good enough or smart enough to be a teacher. And that really hurt me deeply because I come from a family with geniuses. And I am above average in smarts. But what I heard as a young child, and especially with self-loathing already going on, I heard I wasn't smart. And that stayed with me for many, many years. In fact, I earned 4 degrees. And every time I kept earning a degree, I realized I was not any smarter. I was who I was. So sometimes our gifts have to come in ugly wrapping paper, but they're still gifts. So fast forward, I spent 20 years in the Air Force with that same kind of insecurity that I had all my life. I was one of the top people in the Air Force in human resources. I was always winning awards. I was always competing. But I was competing not because I was so proud of myself. I was competing because I was so insecure of myself. So there's a big difference. So I earned a lot of awards, received a lot of recognition, and I was still very, very unhappy. Fast forward, the 20 years were, good development for me in the Air Force. When I got out, I went back to college, got a horticulture degree, did landscaping design, got out there, enjoyed it very much. 2008, 2009, the economy went south. I was going through a change in my life. And I decided that with 20 years working in human resources that I would go back working for our government. So I worked in Asheville VA Hospital in HR for a couple of years. And one of the first things that I noticed in the VA system was nepotism. And that's not a word that's commonly used today, but nepotism is when family and friends get hired by management, which is absolutely illegal. And I noticed that with my background. And I told you I had 4 degrees, most of them in HR and management. Well, I noticed that and I spoke out. And of course, when you speak out in most government agencies, you might pay a high price. And yes, I did. So I was harassed, and they even tried to fire me at the Asheville VA Hospital. And I eventually moved to West Asheville to a VA agency called the MACPAC, which is the revenue part of the Veteran Affairs. Okay? Immediately, as soon as I got there, I noticed that there's about 550 people there, and about 1/3 of them are family and friends. And again, nepotism. All right, so for somebody like me who has sacrificed a whole lot to get those degrees, because it takes a lot of time to get any kind of certification, training, education, whatever, I was really upset when I saw this nepotism. And then I noticed the bullying. For anybody that spoke up, I noticed a lot of them were exiting, leaving. They were getting bullied. Well, let me tell you what I did in the Air Force. Well, first of all, I was a deployment manager for one of the top Air Force bases, Tinker Air Force Base, for deployment. And that's a position that's not easy to run because you're deploying people all around the world to places. And being a female in the Air Force or any military service, let me tell you, it is not easy, okay? When I went in 1985, there were 11% women. When I got out, it had doubled in 2005. So I jokingly tell people, It took me 10 years to get tough, and when I got out, it took me 10 years to get soft again. I was tough, and I was very assertive. So a different, style than I am today. So I spoke up, and I talked to the management about their personnel practices, which were prohibited personnel practices. I was met with resistance, retaliated against. So I turned them into the Office of Special Counsel, which is up in Washington, D.C. They did nothing. I did not stop. I'm not a quitter. I'm stubborn. If anybody knows me, I'm very stubborn and very strong. So I reported to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission because I am a disabled veteran. Now, I don't like to claim that, but the Veteran Affairs calls me a disabled veteran. I needed a medical accommodation to work on the computers that I did, and my workplace would not accommodate me. They would not accommodate me on that. So I reported for disability discrimination because they turned around and tried to fire me. So I dealt with many charges that were false, and I was put on administrative leave for over 100 days. Now that's 100 days that I was at home, I was being paid for, while they tried to fire me, okay? So anything, when it comes to removing somebody from the government, once they have 1 year in, which is when you're considered a permanent party, it takes the lawyers, reviewing everything to make a decision. Well, basically, most everything was dropped, okay? And then I was asked to go back to work. At that time, there was no way I was going to go back to this environment. This is an environment with hostile people, and people telling me I better watch out for my food and water. Now, nobody wants to hear something like that. So ironically, at the same time that I'm feeling like I'm being stalked, that I'm not being accommodated, I'm being harassed, is that I'm making phone calls out to another whistleblower who to this day is still waiting for their time in their trial, their hearing, and I couldn't get through. Their phone was blocked where I couldn't get through. And I said, imagine that. And my mother, of all people, I could not call my mother. Now this is something that can't possibly happen locally. It probably possibly happened at a higher level. But I actually had to call my mother and the other whistleblower 5 times before and hang up before I could get through. So I received harassing phone calls, and what upset me was I qualified and I was allowed to work at home because the job was an administrative computer job, but I was not allowed to do that. That was punishment for being a whistleblower. But yet, there was somebody else out there that was working at home. So I reported them, and after the bullying, we ended up with 2 cases, 2 equal employment opportunity cases, and the administrative judge in Charlotte combined the 2. Fast forward. I passed out twice at work because even though I'm a strong person, when you deal with this for 2 years, I don't care how strong you are going to break down, okay? Passed out, run to the emergency room. The first time, there's no bed for me in the mental health ward. There's only 4 beds in the Asheville VA mental health ward, okay? The second time, I made it. They took my shoestrings away. They treated me like I was suicidal, although I was never suicidal. I was just tired, and I was starting to feel broken, okay? It was my Mother's Day. I'll never forget it for the rest of my life, because I thought if I don't call my mother's going to panic. So I called her and I explained the situation. I informed her, I'm not broken, I'm just tired. Let's fast forward a little bit again. When I was there 3 days, you could say I had an epiphany. And I've become madder than heck at myself because I realized that the biggest bully was not everybody out there. It wasn't the man that molested me. It wasn't my grandmother who gave me tough love. And it wasn't these bullies who didn't like themselves. It was me. It was me because I realized I had made myself a victim and I had become my own worst bully. The 3rd day, I checked myself out after being approved, and amazingly, I was approved really quickly. And I got out there and I worked with an attorney. We settled last year. I did not sign a gag order, and that shocks people. They ask me, how did you do it? Well, first of all, when you have my background, 22 years of HR and a master's degree, you learn everything about HR. And I made my case easy because I knew what I was doing. So we settled last year, and 1 year, well, let me back up. When I settled, I remember saying I would give anything to stand in front of Congress and Senate and tell them that their whistleblowing laws are not protecting anybody. Guess what? Almost 1 year later, I was paid to go to Washington, D.C., and I was up there even talked to Bernie Sanders, and now there are laws in the Senate being passed. So that's my story, my disempowerment. It was a gift in crappy wrapping paper or ugly wrapping paper. And, you know, today I'm an entrepreneur. I work for myself. I'm empowering people. I've been in the Christian Science Monitor, 35 different radio stations. And I have a man who's interested in helping me get on the speaking circuit. So again, you know, sometimes those gifts come in ugly wrapping paper, but I'm really happy for my journey and where I'm at now. So this is a great time to ask if there's any questions that I can answer.
What kind of laws actually? What are the details on the laws? Do you know? The laws that when you went to Washington, D.C.?
Well, they were still formulating that, Michelle, that you're not supposed to be retaliated against when you report somebody. You know, you're whistleblowing. But the problem in the Veteran Affairs is even though they have that, a person who speaks out, it could take them years to get a hearing like I did. Now, I got a hearing in less than a year. That is unheard of, okay? It's only because they triage it, and mine was one of the worst, so I got to the top. The other whistleblower who filed at the same time as me is now waiting, going on to the 3rd or 4th year. So it's triage. So we're waiting to find out about what laws are being passed.
You touched on bullying a little bit. Can you just elaborate a little bit for you what you feel your message is around workplace bullying and what you're going to give people in that?
Okay, great question. The thing is, there's a lot of people that feel strong and they have that strong will to stand up against injustice and bullying. Here's the problem. Most of them do not know where to start. And I will always say that I was the absolute perfect person to go through this because, one, I have 20 years in the Air Force. I have a lot of strength in me. And I'm a woman of faith. So with a background in HR, I knew everything I was doing. In fact, I even, sent emails to the director and all the staff, telling them that they're harassing me, that is affecting my mental and physical health. And that was important because I was documenting it. And it was true. My medical records did reflect that. So it's very important for people to know it's not enough just to speak up. You've got to have an ally. You've got to have a support system.
Can you give us 3 tips that you feel are important in this, as you're talking about it's important for people to speak up? Can you tell us 3 that you feel are important for us to know?
Yeah, if you're ever dealing with workplace bullying, one of the first things that you want to do is you want to document. What does documenting mean? It means keeping up with emails. It means keeping up with records. I purposely, would send emails to the management above and tell them, the harm that was happening to me. And then sometimes I would get derogatory comments back, and I recorded that. I never emailed it at home, knowing my email was being monitored. Then second, self-care. I will fully admit that I was obsessed with holding these people accountable. And that probably is one of the fastest ways to land yourself in the mental health ward, because if you don't have good balance in your life, whether that's meditation, walking, golf, whatever, you're going to be just totally obsessed. And I was obsessed with holding these people accountable. And the third thing is you have to believe in yourself more than other people believe in you. Because when you go through this, they're going to try to tear you up. They're going to try to tear you down. And the Veteran Affairs, attorneys, looked at every angle, to make me look weak or to, make me disempowered. So those are the 3 tips that I would offer to anybody.
Lance?
Did you see any changes in the VA itself because of the things that you brought to light? Any repercussions?
No, I did not. And the thing is, when you settle, we settled 2 days, my attorney and I, 2 days before the hearing. It means that it did not go in front of the judge. I really wanted to go in front of the judge. I had promised the attorney to meet him halfway. He wanted to settle 2 days before. But the thing is because I did not sign a gag order, I've written in my book some of the things that have happened. I get out on radio shows, I get out on, different interviews, with online media and such. And I talk about my experience so I can get it out there. Now, I am a volunteer for Concerned Veterans for America, and that's a group organization that paid me to go to Washington, D.C. They are very actively recruiting people to help work with them, and I'm one of them, to help reform the Veteran Affairs. And what's really cool is this group has sent me 2 VA whistleblowers that I've helped so far. And it's very powerful because, again, people want to speak up, they want to be strong, they want to do the right thing, but they don't know where to start and they don't know their rights. And having a strong background in HR makes me perfect for this role.
To handle it if I have such an experience and where to go, what to do?
Yeah, my book does talk about if you're being bullied. I talk about the different types of bullying. I tell my story. My story is, written just like that as a story, as if I'm sitting here and talking to you right now. And I talk about, the documenting, finding a lawyer. And I realize sometimes that people do not have access to a lawyer because maybe their economics or such. So there in the back of the book is resources, for pro bono work if you need that, and other, HR services, HR consulting, because a person needs to know their rights. And that's what made my story so compelling. I will never forget, as long as I live, the day that my attorney and I depoted the two biggest bullies, in my management. And they act a whole different way when they're in front of an attorney and a recorder and myself.
And do you have a website that you keep that information current?
Yes, Disempoweredwhistleblower.com.
I just wanted to go to the 3 pitfalls you want people to avoid. Like, what are the 3 things they should not do if they see workplace bullying to help them? In other words, don't start sending emails to your friends off work. I mean, what are the 3 things you'd say don't do if you see there's a case coming? The 3 things not to do.
Yeah, well, the first thing is do not email home, because your email can be monitored by your supervisor. Your phones can be monitored. Don't leave privileged information that you're recording in your desk. And then also be careful who you're sharing this information with. In my case, when you file with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, you're bound by their laws that you cannot discuss it with anyone else. So if you discuss it with somebody else and it gets back to the EEOC, they can automatically discharge your case. So it's very, very, very important who you're talking to. Obviously, you can talk to an attorney, a privileged person like that, and you just want to be careful that you don't share that with your coworkers and such. It can get you in so much trouble.
One more question, Dawn, will you show us your book? Is that your book there?
Yes. Okay, and this is my book, The Empowered Whistleblower, A Practical and Spiritual Path to Personal Power. It's now out on Amazon. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm now selling the book for $10, and 25% of that goes to Crystal Visions here. So it's very exciting. I was doing self-publishing through Amazon. This book is meant for others to find their voice, their strength, and their personal power.